Hey, what happens when big business gets out of control? The pendulum's going to swing the other way, and that's how you get the progressive movement. Let's talk about that today. Welcome to Freaking History, and if you want a 3, a 4, or a 5 on your AP World, APUSH, or AP Euro exam, I'm the guy to see. So let's start with 3 presidents that make up this progressive era, which is really kind of 1890-ish, but really 1900 and then in through about 1920. All right, so we've got Teddy Roosevelt, who we're really going to focus on, a little bit of Woodrow Wilson, which is at the end, and in the meat in the middle would be William Taft, which is, if you know Taft, you'd know why that's funny. So here's the thing. Why did the progressive movement happen? Well, that's because there needed to be changes because of all the big business and the industrialization and the large amounts of wealth that were created caused a lot of inequality. And the only people that were there to be able to handle it would be the government. They're the only ones big enough to contest the people in big business. Now, who was it? African Americans, right? It was Protestant church leaders. It was unionists. And it was feminists. Those are the people that were involved in this movement. But to get action and to get things to happen, you need the people to get behind you. To do that, enter the muckrakers. These are the investigative journalists, right? And they're out there writing about things in the corruption of politics, et cetera, and they're focusing on that because they're seeing the inequality amongst the very rich and the poor. And so to get people behind it, they had to know what was actually happening to them. Ida Tarbell is a great example. And when she wrote about Standard Oil and all the corruption that was going on there, eventually that led to Roosevelt in putting the Sherman Antitrust Act and eventually breaking up that company into 34 separate companies. Books like How the Other Half Lives by Jacob Riis, that was a huge influence. You have a book like The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. And even though he was trying to show how immigrants were being treated during that time, what happened was the government looked at this book and said, wow, spoiled meat. That's what the real problem is. That leads to the Food and Drug Act, which eventually creates what we would know as today as the FDA. Okay, political reforms. You have things like the Australian ballot, which is allowed for a secret ballot when you're voting. Robert La Follette of Wisconsin was bringing around the ideas of direct primaries, letting the people choose who they want to represent them in the general elections. We still have those today. Third one would be the direct election of U.S. senators and not the appointment of the legislative body in the states. So the people get a choice. Now, we talked a little bit about Roosevelt, right? And there are some presidents that were involved, but he was the main one. And what he did was he created what they called the square deal. Now, Roosevelt's square deal was, he said, look, we need a good deal for big business and the people where they both get what they want out of this. And by using the Sherman Antitrust Act, he was able to look at trust and say, okay, there are good trust and bad trust. So, for example, the Standard Oil and that trust getting broken up was an example of a bad trust and that needed more competition in that market. But on the other hand, you had a coal mine strike in Pennsylvania during the winter in 1902. Now, this is where Roosevelt stepped in as the government and became the mediator. And some people didn't like that role, that they didn't think a president should take that role. But what he saw was people, right, that were going to be freezing in the winter. And he's like, what are my choices? You can't let these people freeze because the owners don't want to give a raise or don't want to listen to the workers. So he negotiated a deal, and Roosevelt was able to come up with what he thought was a pretty fair deal, which was a 10% wage increase for the workers and a 9-hour workday. The people of the United States, when they heard this and that he brought an end to this, and people were going to have coal for their heat during the winter, it really endeared him to the people, and that led to really his reelection, landslide reelection in 1904. But Roosevelt was also big on conservation. He created what would be the U.S. Forest Service in 1905. And in 1906, he had the Antiquities Act. And this protected lands from big business. And so, as an example, it allowed us to keep the Grand Canyon and not let railroad companies blow it up to put a railroad through there. And if you haven't been to the Grand Canyon, you got to go. Amazing, amazing. I mean, I still don't believe the Colorado River did that. There's no way that river did that. Now, during this progressive era, too, you got to remember African Americans also had a role in this. Coming back, Booker T. Washington, W.B. Du Bois, talking about the rights of the individuals. For example, Booker T. wanting an economic impact by African Americans, learn a skill, become economically independent. Everything's going to be great. Where W.B. Du Bois was like, look, we need our civil rights now. And he was really pushing towards that. And in the end, that led to the development of the NAACP that is still in existence today. But let's not forget about the ladies. Hey, ladies. So Carrie Chapman Catt, C-A-T-T, you're going to need to know who that is. She helped form the NAWSA, National American Women's Suffrage Association. Sorry, I want to make sure I got that right. Now, there was a lady by the name of Alice Paul that was also a part of NAWSA, but she was thinking that Catt was not pushing hard enough. And so she formed her own National Women's Party. Now, that party did lobbying to Congress to get Congress to make that change in women's suffrage. And in the end, they did. That led to the 19th Amendment that was passed in 1920. And now, ladies, you get to be people. Congratulations. Now you know your freaking history. Peace.